Ever since I was much younger, every summer I would make the same 6-hour road trip to a cabin on a lake that one of my uncles owned. Somewhere during my childhood, it became tradition for basically everyone on my mom's side of the family to go up there as a sort of mini vacation together. It was fun. I never really disliked it. I would get to spend a lot of time with my cousins, some of which I was really close with. Really, the only part I didn't like was the drive to get up there. Like I said, it took 6 hours, which might not seem like a lot, but when you're making the drive all by yourself with nothing to keep your mind busy, I don't care who you are, those 6 hours feel like forever. Anyway, this whole story takes place when I was making the annual drive up to my uncle's cabin. I usually try to take the trip in the day, but this year, I of course had just gotten off of a long shift and was expected to be at the cabin the next morning. This forced me to take the drive through the night, something I wasn't exactly excited for. The highway I'd be on for most of the drive saw almost no activity during the day, let alone the night, and it went through a deep forest filled with densely packed trees. Believe it or not, I would usually go the whole drive without stopping, but this time I didn't have a choice. I was near halfway through the drive when I realized my gas gauge was on empty. This irritated me. I'd let my brother borrow my car while I was at work, and he had told me he filled it up. So he either forgot or was straight up lying to me. I began paying attention to the exit signs looking for a gas station. From the looks of it, I wasn't going to make it much further. I didn't really have the luxury of picking and choosing which gas station to stop at, so I was just planning on stopping at the first one I saw no matter what. Fast forward a few minutes, and finally I saw a sign for a gas station off the next exit. Though it wasn't an official road sign, it was literally a picket sign stuck into the ground with the words "Gas Station Next Exit" spray painted on. It was a little sketchy, but I mean, people do the same thing with like fruit stands on the highways, so I ignored the oddity of it. I pulled off the next exit, but I didn't see anything right away. I kept going, far enough to where the road went from smooth pavement to dirt, still surrounded on both sides by trees. Eventually, illuminated by my headlights, I could make out a gas station building on the right side of the road. But I quickly realized the place looked 100% abandoned, like as if it hadn't been open for years. The gas pumps had all been taken out, most of the windows of the building were shattered, and the roof was caving in on itself. There was no way I could get any gas here. I looked at my gas gauge and realized I most likely would not have been able to make it more than a mile. I pretty much had given up at that point. I called AAA, gave them my location to the best of my ability, turned off my car, and stayed put. I wasn't expecting them to be quick. I mean, I was basically in the middle of nowhere. All I could do was sit and wait, so that's what I did. This went on for 30 minutes. My eyes were just now finally starting to truly adjust to the darkness I was in. I found myself just staring at the abandoned gas station building from inside my car. And I don't know if my eyes were playing tricks on me or what, but I swear I could see movement inside the building. I started to panic a bit, knowing that I wouldn't be able to get far should there actually be some sort of threat nearby. I kept my eyes on the building, hoping to prove myself wrong. That's when a distant voice yelled out in a whispered tone, "Hey buddy, come over here." I had my windows open just a crack because of the heat, so I was able to hear it perfectly. My eyes instantly shot to where the voice came from. There was a figure just standing near the left side of the building. I was frozen, with my heart pounding in my ears. After a couple seconds, the figure started walking towards my car, but again, I was frozen, and I didn't and felt like couldn't do anything. And so container inside that he was willing to give me free of charge. All I had to do was get out and follow him. After a few seconds, I simply responded saying no. I didn't know what else to say. There was no way I was getting out of the safety of my locked car to walk inside an abandoned building with this guy. The dude had no reaction. If he had a smile before, it was now gone. He was just standing there, stiff, and had this kind of empty but somewhat frustrated expression. This had to have gone on for a full minute. I didn't really want to say anything to the guy. That's when I heard the most relieving sound I could have heard in that moment. Gravel crunching under the tires of the approaching AAA truck. The guy's head instantly shot in the truck's direction, followed by him sprinting back towards the building and into the forest. As he did this, I saw what has to be the most unsettling sight I've ever laid witness to. What had to have been at least 8 other figures stood up from hiding behind a set of bushes just in front of the building and also started running into the forest. These were people that I would no doubt have come into contact with had I agreed to the supposed free container of gas. A few seconds went by when the man in the AAA truck walked up to my window with a confused expression on his face. The guy was big, I'd guess at least 6'5", 250 pounds. He asked me if I called about the gas. I said yes, and he then asked me who all those people were that just ran into the forest. I went on to explain the whole situation, and just how creepy it was. Hearing it, he offered to call the nearest town sheriff's department, which we ended up doing. But he filled up my car, and I was off before they showed up. However, the next day I would be informed that nobody was ever found. This night has haunted me ever since. The man I talked to was obviously trying to lure me into some sort of trap. What that was though, I don't know. But, I mean, you have to consider, I was on an empty dirt road in the forest and miles away from any town, house, you name it. It was anything but good. I also just don't understand why there were so many people involved. What I do know though is how thankful I am for the AAA truck showing up when it did. Had that not occurred, and who knows what would have happened. This all took place a few years ago. It was sometime in July, and I decided to go on an impromptu solo road trip for a day. I'm fairly into sightseeing, and there were a couple somewhat nearby places I still wanted to cross off my bucket list before I had to go back to college in August. The plan was to wake up early to start the road trip, then see a few different places during the day, and finally start the trip back home sometime around 9 p.m. or so. I figured this way I could maximize my time without having to pay for a hotel or anything. The trip there was fine. It was the trip back that was a different story. I ended up leaving around 10 p.m. Apple Maps estimated it would take about 4.5 hours to get back home. I had done about half that when I was starting to get tired, like to the point where it was becoming dangerous to drive. I told myself the next rest stop I saw, I'd stop and take an hour nap before continuing. That way I could still get home at a somewhat decent time. So I did just that. I saw a rest stop and pulled into the parking lot. The first thing I noticed was the lack of cars. The place was completely empty, and had it not been for some lights on, I would have thought the place was abandoned. But I guess this made sense. I mean, it was really late. Anyway, I leaned back my seat and set an alarm to go off in an hour. Fast forward to when it did go off, and I realized I'd have to go inside, as I now had to use the bathroom. I started walking to the building. When I got inside, I found the bathrooms and opened one of the stalls. I was in there for not even 30 seconds when I could suddenly hear someone talking outside the bathrooms and in the hallway. This shocked me as I didn't even hear the main door open, and my car was the only one in the parking lot just a minute ago. I didn't see how anyone could have been in here. That's when the bathroom door opened. I was a bit on edge, but I realized it was most likely just another regular person that I somehow didn't notice. I was ready to leave when slight knocks on the stall door. I awkwardly responded with, someone's in here. No response. It was complete silence. I was a bit more on edge now, so I decided I'd stay in the stall until he left. That's when I noticed an eye looking through the crack in the stall's door. As we made eye contact, the guy started screaming and relentlessly beating his head against the door. Thinking quick, I used my whole body to bash into the door, bursting it open and knocking the guy off his feet. I proceeded to run as fast as I could out of the bathroom and outside towards my car. I was about halfway when I heard the main door burst open behind me. This guy was chasing me. Finally, I got to my car and started backing up, but the guy caught up to me and managed to slam his body into my car as I sped off. I looked into my rearview mirror, and as I got further away, I saw the guy get up like it was nothing and just stand there, looking in my direction. I was beyond shaken up. I couldn't process what had just happened. I honestly didn't know what to think. You always hear about crazy stories like this, but never once think it'll actually happen to you. I probably went a good 30 over the speed limit the rest of the way home. Needless to say, I wouldn't be falling asleep driving. I was now completely filled with adrenaline.
I just used this one app, it's called Captions. Just import your clip, select a viral style, and it automatically applies.
I still have no idea who that guy was, where he even came from, or what his problem was. Though, if I had to guess, I would say it was probably some homeless guy who just wasn't right in the head. But then again, what homeless person would be all the way out in practically the middle of nowhere next to the highway? It didn't make sense. All I know is I've never stopped at a rest stop since, and I plan to keep it that way. Every year around the holiday season, my extended family would get together and collectively chip in to rent out a nice house to spend the holidays together. There were actually a lot of us that would join in, and I was no exception. I always looked forward to it. This year, everyone decided to rent out a house in Arizona. I would be going straight from college, so I'd be driving alone. Typically, I'd opt to fly, but I wanted to have a car down there, as renting them over long periods of time can get pretty expensive. The trip would be around 8 hours, with most of it being on a stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert. When I was about 5 hours in, it had gotten completely dark outside. Literally all you could see was what was directly in front of your headlights. It was a bit eerie, yet relaxing at the same time. It's hard to explain, you just kinda have to do it yourself to understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, cut to around an hour later, and I began to notice this car that had been behind me for a few hours. Now, when you're on the only stretch of road in the middle of the desert, usually you don't bat an eye to a car following you for hours on end. It's not that far off to assume they're just going to the same city. But this time felt different. I had started to notice the car getting closer and closer to my bumper, like literally what had to have been an inch away before abruptly backing off just to do the same thing over again. This would go on for a while, and the more it did, the more uneasy I felt. I mean, it was genuinely starting to scare me. If this guy was really just wanting to go faster, he could have passed me hours ago. This went on for even longer, when up ahead, I actually saw a police car parked on the side of the road. I contemplated stopping. A part of me felt like I was just being paranoid about the whole situation, but ultimately, I decided I would stop anyway. I pulled up next to the officer, and he asked what I needed. I told him everything that had happened. I also told him how I might have just been being paranoid, but surprisingly, he took my claims very seriously. He went on to explain how it's actually not uncommon for unsuspecting drivers to be targeted and have their cars stolen on these empty highways. He then offered to follow me, as I guess a way to make me feel safer. I would of course accept his offer, so off we went. This went on for a few minutes, before, disturbingly, I could start to make out the car that had been following me, now up ahead in front of me and waiting on the side of the road. Right as it saw the police officer following me, it booked it in the other direction. And not long after, the police car went from following me to turning around and chasing the vehicle with its lights and siren on. I was once again alone. The police officer's suspicions were correct. Why else would the car have just been waiting for me? And a better question, why would it have run from the police? This whole thought still haunts me to this day. I still have no idea whether the car was caught or if it got away. I never got the cop's name, but whoever he was, I'm extremely grateful for him. I still think about what could have happened had I not stopped to talk to him.
Students in writing, everybody get under your desk.
This took place 2 years ago, and I can still recall every moment in almost perfect detail. It was nearing the end of school. Everyone was on their way to their last period, which for me was history, a class that I not only wasn't good at, but I also disliked the teacher, and at that point I honestly had no motivation of even showing up. So, ultimately, I decided to ditch and hide out in one of the bathroom stalls located near the very back of the school. Almost no one went back there, so I figured no one would find out anyway. I was in the furthest back stall, playing some game on my phone, when the ear-deafening sound of the principal coming over the intercom made me jump.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building, lock the door, and turn off all lights.
It was a lockdown announcement, though I honestly didn't pay it any attention, considering they were all practice, and so I just continued to sit there in the stall and wait. But just then, all the lights to the building seemingly shut off all at once. The hum of the light faded, along with the buzzing of the AC unit, which meant all the power to the school had been cut off. The bathroom had gone pitch black, and that's when I was actually starting to get worried. Power was never cut off during practice lockdown drills. I texted my friend asking him what was going on, and literally right away he answered back with a text saying, "Dude, where are you? It's a real lockdown. Everyone's asking where you are." I told him I was in the bathroom, and he responds saying I should hide. But where else could I go? I wasn't just gonna run out into the hallway to find a better spot. So ultimately, I decided to stay and hide in the stall I was in. I turned my phone's brightness down and texted my friend again. I asked him what the reason was for the lockdown, and after 5 long minutes of waiting, he replied saying that apparently there was a kid armed with a knife banging on classroom doors and asking to be let in. Both my classroom and the bathroom I was in were on the same floor, so I turned off my phone and tried my best to see if I could hear anything. There were running footsteps, and that was shortly followed by the sound of the bathroom door opening. I was absolutely horrified at what I was hearing. Whoever entered walked towards the stall next to me, went inside, and shut the door. I held my breath for what seemed like forever. Then, to break the silence, in a shaky voice, I said, "Who's in here?" It was silent for a second, and then I heard a voice reply with, "I'm just looking for a place to hide. I heard there was a lockdown over the speakers." That didn't really answer my question, but the guy sounded around my age, and so I decided I'd just let it go. We sat in silence for what seemed like forever, when finally we got another announcement telling all students to exit the school in an orderly fashion through the front doors, where cops would be waiting outside. I exited the stall, but was surprised to see the guy next to me didn't. I asked him if he was coming, and he replied saying, Yeah man, just give me a couple minutes." I thought that was weird, but regardless, I left the bathroom and started heading towards the front exit of the school. As I was walking, my phone went off. My friend had texted me. He said that apparently a kid who was maybe a couple years older than us tried to rob a nearby gas station at knife point. The guy actually stabbed a couple people, and when he was unsuccessful in getting any money, he ran to hide in our school to blend in as one of the students. But what horrified me the most was the last sentence. My friend said that the cops outside were saying that the kid was still inside, and that he was hiding somewhere in the back of the school. Reading this changed my walk to the front doors into a full-on sprint. Right as I got outside, I would frantically inform one of the police officers of what I had experienced. And after they searched the bathroom, they found it was empty, but that the window inside was broken. The kid had broken and escaped through the window. Needless to say, for the next few school days, I had gotten a lot of unwanted attention because of what I had experienced. As far as I know, the kid still hasn't been caught, and it's still just difficult for me to come to terms with the fact that I was unknowingly hiding in a stall right next to the guy I was trying to hide from.
Have
The drill or not, but I knew either way I had to follow protocol. I turned off the room's lights, locked the doors and windows, and had the kid sit against the walls out of sight. I'd say maybe 5 minutes passed of complete silence when I could faintly start to hear doors being banged on down the hall. I could feel my heart start to race as the sounds got louder as whoever was banging on the doors got closer. At this point, I still had no idea whether it was just the principal checking all the classroom locks or an actual intruder in the school. But my thoughts were interrupted by one of my students bursting out crying. It was too loud. There's no doubt whoever was outside would have been able to hear it. I could tell. The banging outside stopped in response to the noise, shortly after followed by a single pair of footsteps walking up to the door. It was silent for a few seconds, but the silence was quickly broken by a male's voice yelling out, "Hey guys, I think there's kids in this one." And that confirmed this lockdown was real. More footsteps could be heard running up to the door, and that's when genuine attempts to break down the door were made by multiple people. At that point, not a single kid in the class wasn't crying or screaming in fear. I didn't know what to do. I was never trained for this kind of situation. And that's when 2 gunshots could be heard. But it didn't come from the intruders. Police were now inside the building. Right after the shots were fired, the intruders could be heard running down the hall. 30 minutes later, and we were given the all clear. It turns out the intruders were 3 local high school students. They were eventually caught, but when asked why they did it, they would say close to nothing. Although, one of the kids claimed it was a bet, but personally I don't believe that for a second. No bet is worth going to court over and even possibly losing your freedom. I firmly believe they had much worse intentions. Although most likely traumatized, luckily no one was physically hurt. The shots that were fired by the police were claimed to have been warning shots and were aimed directly into the ground. It's been 2 years since this all happened, and I still teach first grade at the same school and even in the same classroom. And to this day, those bullet holes can still be seen in the school's hallway. This happened back when I was in middle school. Technically, it was actually my last day in middle school. It was late May, and for our last day, our school would do a sort of field day where the whole school would play a bunch of games to celebrate the end of the school year. Now, back then, I used to be a pretty active kid, but unfortunately, due to a recent concussion, I was unable to participate in any games the whole day. I was pretty disappointed, yeah, though I did bring my DS and quickly opted to just sit inside one of the classrooms and play that. As, there wasn't really anything else I could do. None of the teachers seemed to mind, so there I was, all by myself in the classroom for my science class playing my DS, all the while the other kids got to play games in the school's gymnasium. It was a weird feeling being in that classroom alone. I don't really know how to explain it. Up until that point, I don't think I'd ever been in a classroom completely alone. Something that needs to be mentioned is that the teachers that weren't watching the kids in the gymnasium were in a room across the hall having meetings. I'd say I was playing on my DS for not even an hour when my English teacher, Miss Allen, rushed up to the classroom's door and closed it from the outside. She didn't say anything to me, so I figured she just wanted to make sure I couldn't hear whatever the teachers were talking about across the hall. Forgetting about it, I went back to playing my DS. A couple minutes later, the classroom's door swung open. I expected to see one of the teachers coming in to check on me, but no, a man I'd never seen before walked into the room and closed the door behind him. The guy had to have at least been in his 50s, and so I just assumed it was some kid's dad. It wasn't unusual for parents to come into the school to bring a student their lunch, so I asked if he was looking for someone. He replied with no, in a tone that seemed almost offended that I would even ask that question. Before I could say anything else, the guy started walking towards me. I asked him what he was doing, and that's when he lifted up his shirt, revealing a handgun on his waistband. He followed it up by saying, "Look, kid, I'm gonna need you to come with me, or I'm gonna kill you." The guy said it in the most carefree tone I had ever heard, and that along with the fact that I'd never even seen a gun in person before instantly overwhelmed me with pure fear. Before I could fully comprehend the danger of the situation I was in, the guy firmly grabbed my wrist and started pulling me towards the classroom door. But before we got into the hallway, the deafening sound of our school's lockdown alarm started going off. This was followed by the guy instantly letting go of my wrist and making a run for it down the hall and through a back exit. I stood there in shock for a second, but ultimately went back inside the classroom. I'm not sure how much time had passed when Miss Allen came back into the room and told me that she didn't want to scare me, but that there had been an intruder inside the building and a lockdown which now was over had taken place. I would tell her about the man, and instantly she brought me to a police officer who was already on the premises to explain what I had experienced. It turns out the man was the whole reason the school went into lockdown in the first place. The man was reported to have been scoping out the school all morning, and when he was seen getting close to the building itself, someone would call the police, which resulted in the lockdown. The guy was later caught and would openly admit that he had been trying to scare kids into getting into his car so he could kidnap them. And this reality still horrifies me to this day. Not a day goes by where I'm not thankful for the school's alarm going off when it did.
With VerboCare, get support